Order Flow Trading Course Lesson 2, Order Flow Software and Data Feeds, presented by Michael Valtos, founder of orderflows.com. First, the disclaimer. This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to buy or sell a futures contract or make any other type of investment decision. Futures trading contains substantial risk and is not for every investor. An investor could potentially lose all or more than the initial investment. Risk capital is money that can be lost without jeopardizing one's financial security or lifestyle. Only risk capital should be used for trading, and only those with sufficient risk capital should consider trading. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. CFTC Rules 4.41. Hypothetical or simulated performance results have certain limitations. Unlike an actual performance record, simulated results do not represent actual trading. Also, since trades have not been executed, the results may have under or overcompensated for the impact, if any, of certain market factors such as lack of liquidity. Simulated trading programs in general are also subject to the fact that they are designed without the benefit of hindsight. No representation is being made that any account will or is likely to achieve profit or losses similar to those shown. Okay, so let's get started. Software and data feeds. Now, there are many different order flow software packages on the market. They have a wide range of prices. They're priced anywhere from $100 to $4,500 and more even. I think I've seen some, starting at $4,500 and then, going up to $10,000. It's quite crazy. Now, there are many types of data feeds. Level 1 is all that is needed with order flow footprint charts. Level 2 is needed if you're looking at the depth of a market. Say you have a dome and you want to trade, looking at the depth of the market, 5 levels deep, you'll need level 2. For data feeds, I recommend Kinetic or CQG. There are others out there. You could use IQ Feed, Continuum Data. There's eSignal. There's really, many different data feeds. I use NinjaTrader, so, Kinetic is probably, works best with NinjaTrader. If you're using, some other softwares, you can connect it to different data feeds. It should be noted that Interactive Brokers, their data feed for their footprint charts is, you got to be careful. The way they are taking in the data and disseminating it out, it's horrible for as far as footprint charts. For bar charts, it's probably acceptable, but they're aggregating the data and taking it by certain times, so it's not an actual flow of what's being traded in the markets. So, ideally, you'll want to have, two data feeds. I use Kinetic, then I also have Continuum. Now, don't solely rely on the data feed provided from your futures broker. There's times where you could lose your connection and you'll lose your data. So you should always try and have a backup data feed. I know it's the cost involved, but if trading is going to be your business, you should take that into account. Now, there's different types of data feeds. There's a quote data feed and there's an order routing data feed. So, if you're going to be trading through, say, NinjaTrader, Kinetic is not a order routing data feed. You'll want to use something like their Continuum or the one that's provided from NinjaTrader. So you just talk to your broker on what data feeds they have available for you. Now, you don't necessarily need to look at a footprint chart on an order routing system. You can run, NinjaTrader. You can run NinjaTrader with Kinetic data, but you don't have to route your orders through it if you don't want to. Say you have another broker and they have their different front end. That's perfectly fine. There's a lot of traders that do that. They use the NinjaTrader just as their charting software. They're not necessarily routing their orders through it. So, just a brief background about me. In the past, I have used many different order flow softwares to trade. In the end, they're all basically the same. It's the volume footprint chart. The problem is, I'll say the problem, but there's only so many ways you can disseminate, analyze the data, analyze the order flow. When you're looking at a footprint chart, a footprint chart just tells you what's traded on the bid and the offer, where the imbalances are, and a few other things. They don't necessarily analyze the order flow. That's why people think order flow trading is a system. It's not a system. It takes the data and presents it to you in a different way than normal. It gives you a lot more information than a normal bar chart. So when you're choosing your software, you have to decide what your needs are. Are you good with software? You like to tinker around with code? If so, then maybe the bottom end software is good for you, since it has very little documentation and there are lots of builds. So, if you're the type that likes to play around with setting things up, you could get a version of the Gomi footprint from Big Mike's Trading. I think now it's futures.io. It's free, but you got to join the website and pay like $100. I mean, it's worth it, to join that website. But even if you don't take out the available software that's there. But if you're a bit like me and you don't have the patience or the inclination to really sit down and write code and try and troubleshoot everything, you're going to want a software that all you got to do is just import it into your system and you can start looking at the market. Now, what are your choices? So, just real quickly, I'll go through a bunch of them real quick. There's orderflows.com. It's $750 for a lifetime license. Orderflows is my company, actually. So, a lot of the charts you're going to see here are based on my software. Now there's NOF Traders. They recently raised the price to $4,500 for a lifetime license. There's orderflowanalytics.com. They've got different prices, $2,500, almost $5,000 for a lifetime license. There's finalg.com. It's $59 a month you could lease it for, or $750 for a lifetime license. There's orderflowtrading.net. It's $74 a month, or basically $2,000 for a lifetime license. Market Delta, which will run on CQG data. Market Delta is one of the originals out there. It's very stable, very good software. It's a little pricey though. It's $129 a month or $175 a month, depending on what you're getting with it. There's a discount for quarterly subscription. There's auctiondashboard.com. It's $180 for a lifetime license. It's interesting software. They cover, they include a DOM in their software, which is a nice little feature. So there's the futures.io, which is formerly Big Mike's Trading. It's called the Gomi ladder on there. What you do is you sign up for Big Mike's futures.io, and if you want to become an elite member, it costs $100. But once you're a member, you get access to all their user submitted software, and there's a Gomi footprint ladder in there. Gomi later, I believe, went to do some work for NOF. So, it's a good software. I mean, if you just want to get started, but you have to know how to. I think you got to know a little bit of programming. So there's a lot of people that don't necessarily, have the time or the inclination to do it. So, but if you're someone that likes to tinker around with coding and troubleshooting stuff, then it's definitely worth it. I think, I mean, the website itself is worth it even without the software, the free software that's available. Now, there's also tradeorderflow.com, which is ridiculously priced, $4,500, $6,500, or even close to $13,000 for a lifetime license. It's just ridiculous, in my opinion. You know, this software is basically a footprint chart. Jigsaw trading. Now, it's not a footprint chart, rather it's a dome. But, you know, I mention it here because it's a good piece of software if you're, you know, trading. It can help you manage, you know, your trading. Once you get, you know, getting in and out, you know, it's one click. If you don't necessarily want to, you know, trade off a footprint chart per se, you know, I think it's good it's a good addition to having a footprint chart. Now, there's indicatormall.com, which is basically $200 for a lifetime license. I think Peter also has a lease for about $25 a month. It's good. It's good software. You know, the creator is a good guy. I know him, so you know it's a good footprint chart to use. You know, it's a little bit different than the one from Futures.io in the sense that it's really ready to go. The Futures.io one, the Gomi ladder, you really I think you gotta play around with a little bit to get it working. Whereas the one from Indicator Mall, you could just install directly onto your, you know, onto your NinjaTrader. Now, Rancho Dinero, they have a couple of choices. There's one for basically $1,200, and there's one for $1,800 for a lifetime license. You can also lease them for less. They actually integrate a lot with a market profile. So, I mean, if market profile is something that floats your boat, you know, I think the Rancho Dinero is probably something you should look at. But it's, I mean, they have footprint charts, which the way they take to read the data is on the bid up-down ticks, which is explained on the website. You know, it's going to help you if you want to look at historical data. So it's one of the few softwares that can allow you to see historical data. But, you know, I think the data is a little bit different than, you know, normally what you're going to see. But they don't really necessarily talk very much about the footprint charts in their education. So you know, there are some templates you can download, but it's a little bit tricky to get used to. Then there's OrderFlow Dash Pro, which is basically also a footprint chart. That's $89 a month, and they also have a lifetime license for about $1,200 as well. So, you know, do you want software that has a lot of features you won't use or indicators that don't even apply to order flow? You find those in more expensive software because they're looking for a reason to, you know, to raise the price. You know, so you're going to see a lot of things in some of these expensive softwares that, you know, isn't really order flow trading. You know, they'll add in, you know, some, you know, VWAP or something, which, you know, they sort of bastardize it into something that it's not. You know, they basically turn it into a moving average. You know, but then they start charging you a lot for it. You know, if you want to trade with order flow, you want to concentrate on order flow. You don't want to necessarily start using other indicators that are unrelated to order flow to base your decisions on. I mean, that said, you can use order flow with, you know, other indicators, but, you know, when you're starting to understand order flow, you should understand order flow before you start mixing it into, you know, other indicators. Now, you know, I created my own software called Order Flows Trader because, you know, I've traded with order flows for many years, and one of the reasons that I created the software is because, you know, I'm a trader and I'm not a programmer. I don't have time to spend days programming or setting up software, and, you know, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars on software that, you know, has indicators that make no sense to me because they're black box indicators and they don't tell you what the logic is behind it, you know, or their drawings, you know, other lines on there that I'm not necessarily looking at. I don't really care to apply moving averages or anything like that to my order flow, my order flow analysis. I want to analyze the order flow, not a bunch of other unrelated things going on in the market. So, one of the main things that makes Order Flows Trader different than the rest of the software out there is that it allows you to interpret the order flow by highlighting areas where buying or selling is drying up, or where there are large buyers or sellers participating. It's, like I said, it's one thing to have an order flow chart, but you still need to know how to interpret it. That's why I created the Order Flows Trader, because I used to be able to look at the chart, get an idea, do some calculations in my head to determine, if there was buying or selling was drying up, or what I considered a large buyer or a large seller being active in the market. But when I envisioned the Order Flows Trader, I wanted something that would just tell me at a glance. That way I could look at a few more markets rather than just one or two. I could, expand it to 4 or 5 or 6 markets at once. It would just help me diversify, but give me other trading opportunities during the day. So really quick, this is an Order Flows Trader chart. So it'll print ratio, it'll print numbers, and you can see areas in there where the volume is drying up, or where there was considered heavy sellers, all sorts of things that you're not going to see on a regular order flows chart, especially not on a bar chart. So you can see how how the market is reacting around certain areas. It's all this will be explained further in the course, but the main thing is it's helping you analyze the order flow rather than just looking at a bunch of numbers and not knowing how to make heads or tails out of them. What's the point of having an order flow chart if you don't know how to use it? If you're spending thousands of dollars for an order flow chart, but you don't know what's going on, it's kind of a waste of money. So that said, everything in this course is based on using my software, the Order Flows Trader. But that said, what I teach you in this course can be applied to any other similar order flow footprint chart. You don't necessarily have to use my software. It helps, but the other software isn't going to show you the setups the way the Order Flows Trader will show you. I have my software created in such a way that the setups will stand out more. If you're looking at a normal order flows footprint chart, then you have to look more closely at it, and maybe do a little bit of calculation from it and make your trading decisions. I've been in the futures industry for 20 years, so a lot of my experience over that 20 years has been put into the software. And it's not like I've been trading on myself. I've been trading for JP Morgan for 8 years, Cargill for 4 years, Commerzbank, the big German bank, for 3 years, EDF Man for 2 years. They're all institutional firms, right? And I've had exposure to some of the biggest traders in the world. I've talked to them on a daily basis. I know what they think and how they execute orders. All that stuff that I've learned over the years, in addition to how I've learned to trade myself, all that stuff goes into my software. So, one of the things that really bothers me about a lot of traders is their software is, their screen has got so many lines. It's like a headache. You look at it and you're like, how do you make heads, how do you decide to go to buy or sell? There's so many lines and so many different colors. When people, when you're trading for a bank, you don't sit there and say, I've never heard anyone say, well, it's the MACD is crossing the zero line, it's time to sell. They don't think like that. They don't sell because MACD is at this level or this oscillator across there. They've got much different, different views of the market. they're not looking at charts with all sorts of squiggly lines. Traders are looking at charts that are clean. That they're interested in where prices, where it's trading relative to, recent highs or, yearly highs, things like that. And order flow, you should keep your charts clean. You don't need all sorts of different lines in there. That's just confusing the heck out of you. But, I said, you don't need to use my software to understand order flows. I mean, you could go through this course and, trust me, after this course, you should have learned a lot already. But, if you're interested in my software, you can purchase it at, at a reduced price. So I said, I'm not here to try and gouge money out of you. The order flow is something that, everybody should be available to have to trade. I could easily charge $5,000 for the software, but, honestly, there's no need to, I just charge a reasonable price, pay for the programming, pay for the work behind it. But, one of the major drawbacks that a lot of trading software has is their education. There is no education. You could buy indicators. It seems they spend more time writing the sales page than writing the instruction manual. How many indicators have you bought, where all you get with it is maybe a 2 to 3 page PDF on the settings, if that. You may just download the thing and then they give you like a 1-pager on what the settings mean. They don't teach you the logic behind the indicator or why it should work. Basically, here's this indicator, here's a few sample charts on where it worked. They don't necessarily, you don't know why it's, what's going on with it. It could just be something completely random. Usually not. Some people, basically just take indicators out of a book that's 30 years old and, try and rework it for the present. But, it's just one of those things, it's like, you'd think that, people selling, indicators or, trading things would want to take the time to really explain it to you. So, because if you make money, then everybody wins. But, just, there's a lot of people out there that they think just sell it and get the money and move on to the next indicator and, find some more people to sell it to and just keep on going. Now, so that was one of the things, with my order flows traders. So one of the problems, and I said I've used other software before I created this software, and it's really a pain in the butt trying to get it all set up and make it, how you just see it in on their website. 1 or 2 places offer templates, but with Order Flows Trader, I give you the template that I use. It's the template that you see on these charts. So, once you install Order Flows Trader, you can load the template and your charts will look just like mine. But also, what comes with the book is a guide. I wrote a book on trading order flow. It's 150 pages. It's called Trading Order Flow. Which is, very informative. Some people come to me, they just want to buy the book. That tells me that, there isn't much education out there, for people learning order flow. And it's a shame because I said, order flow is such a great way to trade, but there's very few places to really learn it. That's one of the reasons why I created this course. So, it's up to you as to which software you want to use for your order flow analysis. Like I said, there's a lot that's good. That's out there. You don't necessarily have to use mine. I think if you use mine, you'll understand it better. But you just remember, just because something is priced high doesn't mean that it works better. A lot of people think I could buy this software for $4,000, $5,000, and I'll start making money. No, I know a lot of people that have bought the software for $4,000, $5,000, and they couldn't make any money with it. And in the end, they're out $4,000. at a minimum. That's not even counting what they lost trading, which is much more than the software cost. So, choose a software that you're comfortable with and can understand, and rather than something that looks good and is expensive, and they put up videos saying, "Oh, today I made $1,200." Apparently, the systems, some of these videos, people, they never lose, which is quite amazing. If that's the case, guys, might as well just open up a hedge fund. But people ask, this is really where a lot of software belongs, in the garbage dump. I gotta admit, honestly, I've bought indicators here and there, just because I'm curious, with them. I mean, sometimes they really look so good in their advertisements, or, on their websites. And, sometimes, I do want some of them to work, but, most don't. As I said, you find that things are cherry-picked more often than not. But I mean, there are some good softwares out there that's not order flows. I mean, some good indicators, but it really depends on who's developing them, and how the person thinks. Honestly, I've bought some more like Elliott Wave stuff just because I wanted to see how it works with order flow. They said there are some good vendors out there, but majority of them just belongs here on the garbage dump. So this is the end of lesson 2, covering order flow, trading software, and data. In the next lesson, I'll explain how to read an order flow chart, which for most people is a new way of looking at the market. So end this lesson now, and pick it up in the next lesson.